Traffic and Refuse Committee will now be called to order. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Conway.
Present.
Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Murphy.
Here.
Alderman Kotar.
Here.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Martin.
Present. Here.
Chairman Boyd.
Present.
5 present. You have a quorum.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to put Board Bill 113 before the committee for consideration.
Second.
It's been moved in second. Madam Clerk.
Who was the second?
Alderman Conway, please call the roll.
Alderman Conway.
Aye.
Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Murphy.
Aye.
Alderman Kotar.
Aye.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Martin.
Aye.
Chairman Boyd.
Aye.
5 aye votes.
Okay, thank you. What's before us, Board Bill 113, sponsored by Alderman Arnowitz. I'm sorry, I'm in the hot seat, so I'll move.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Before you today is Board Bill 113 that was originally introduced, and we had made some changes to it as requested, and I get it, why we're doing it and everything. So I guess this morning I'm asking about Board Bill 113 be amended as read.
But until the amendment is before us, why don't you just go ahead and kind of talk to us
Okay.
about why you're...
Basically, what Board Bill 113 is, a gentleman who grew up over on Fillmore Street, which is in the 13th Ward, and I've talked to Alderwoman Murphy. Their family lived there for years. He went to Cleveland High School. He graduated in 1968. Went to Kansas State on a full scholarship. After his first semester, he quit school, joined the Army. He was eventually into the Green Beret and was over in Vietnam. They were on a mission over in Vietnam to rescue 11 POWs, him and 2 other fellow soldiers. While they were escaping and trying to get to safety, everyone made it back. Ron Bozikis stood back for the gunfire and was eventually killed. They had a business in St. Louis City. Like I said, the family lived on Fillmore, so what we wanted to do was try to honor him in some way, you know, honor a veteran that we believe gave us all. He received numerous medals. He is also actually up for the Congressional Medal of Honor now. So we just thought by doing an honorary street sign in his name would be kind of nice. And I also have signed names from the area of Fillmore and Coronado where it will be erected. And that's basically what we're trying to do.
Okay. While we're waiting on an amendment, why don't we go around and see if there are any questions by members of the committee? Alderman Conway? You don't want to help us out?
We can just go on to the next bill.
Okay. Alderman Murphy?
No comment. I concur with everything the alderman from the 12th said. I knew him slightly, ended up going to college with his sister. Later on, I grew up there myself in that area, so I would just concur with whatever he said and support this bill.
Okay. Alderwoman Martin?
No questions, fully support it.
Okay, so what we're going to do, since we don't have the amendment yet, we're going to just lay this aside and we'll come back to it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. The next board bill we'll hear is Board Bill 129, sponsored by Alderman Caro.
And there are some people who want to speak. I don't know, I bet they're using on both sides. But,
What one's this, 129?
Someone wanted to speak on 129.
Okay,
So-
Alderman Caro, why don't you go ahead and speak
yeah,
on
so it is probably most of us are aware that maybe 6 or 8 weeks ago, a horse carrying a couple people went running off down the riverfront with a 4-year-old kid and someone else jumping out of it. And prior to that, a horse, again, ran off into the river in St. Charles with the carriage on it and drowned. And prior to that, there was a horse, my understanding, that had died in Tillis Park, so not in the city, but in the county. So I was on the news, and I had said, what really needs to happen is some regulation where at least there's always someone in control of the reins at all times. Well, someone called me, assuming it was one of the owners of the company, that said they're regulated by the taxi commission, there's basically nothing I can do, and that I should be busy regulating the corrupt politicians and lay off them, which I looked, they are regulated by the taxi commission. So by offering to ban them altogether, which there are people here, and a large group that would like to ban the horses, going through that, that brought a lot of information to me about the condition of the stables and everything. I figured at least if we go toward banning them, it might get them to the table to talk about at least some regulations, some real regulations on how the horses are treated, that someone is actually in control of them horses at all times, because the 2 incidents that I'm aware of was big trouble. Nobody was up in the seat in control of the horse. The horse was basically on its own. So, I mean, that's how I come about this. So after talking to some of the people that'll actually come up and talk, you'll see where it came about and why my thought process to ban the horses is there. And if we ban them, wonderful, and if nothing else, if it gets them to the table to talk about serious regulations that protect the horses, the riders, and the people around them, this could be a whole different story. Had that horse that ran down the riverfront, it ran into a car. What happens? It was a crowded day, the people were walking around the arch grounds. What happens if that horse would have ran over and killed someone? And I brought that up, and I was told, well, you take a risk every day you get up. So that was the answer. There has to be, I also don't let my 3-year-old kid drive a car. So there has to be some either regulations or banning on the horses. And other than that, that's my board bill, and I know there's people who speak on it, so. And I don't know, there might be people who speak on both sides, so.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and take some questions from the committee, and then I'll take public comment. Alderman Conway.
Wow. I mean, you can't just come in here with a bill that says ban, hoping to get conversation. I think you need a solution and then allow people to react to that. My perspective on this bill is, I'd be opposed to it, but I don't have a problem limiting their circulation patterns in the city. I have seen they go on any street, anytime, anywhere, sometimes 2 and 3 abreast. And I think that whether it's the taxi commission or us, someone has to set up a pattern. They can get to the tourist sites or whatever they might, but it's a danger to traffic downtown. There's too many of them at this point in time.
Well, so, and I'll answer. The problem with that is we can't regulate them, the taxi commission does. And the bigger problem, although I agree with traffic being a problem, there's no one sitting in the seat in control of the reins. So when these horses do what they do.
Well, I haven't seen that, Alderman.
Well, how do you think the horse ran into the river? There was nobody there to hold the horse back. The horse that ran down the riverfront that people were diving out of, a lady with her 4-year-old kid that dove out of this thing that was on the news, there was nobody sitting in the seat.
Well, and I don't know why they weren't sitting in the seat at that point in time.
Well, don't you think that saying there needs to be 2 people so that someone's in control of the horse at all times?
There's been horses on this planet for 20,000 years.
I hope
Okay,
so.
and man has domesticated the horse. So, some cases, yeah, I mean, dogs occasionally bite. I don't know what the circumstances were there, but that isn't enough of an, incentive for me to do anything today.
Okay, Alderwoman Murphy.
I kind of tend to concur with the alderman from the 8th. You made exceptions for everyone except downtown. So we're
No,
going to
no.
completely ban downtown? It
No.
looks like we can do mounted police parades, we
Right.
can do
If the
Tower
pra-
Grove Park.
If the parade's downtown, or if you're in a park, then, you know, so if they're gonna do them in Tower Grove Park, or they're gonna do them in Forest Park, you know, it says it, and if there's a parade, there's proper places, which probably speaks to what Alderman Conway was talking about. There are proper places, so banning them totally, you're not gonna ban police horses.
Right, no, I see that. So the only exception is the carriages downtown.
No, the carriages, no, horses anywhere. If I wanna come to
Well,
work
you
on a
said here
horse
that they
next
can
week,
work in Tower Grove Park.
so it's not banning them.
That's what I'm saying.
In
So the
parks.
only part you're actually banning is downtown.
No, what if they decide, what if I decide to ride a horse to work next week, or I decide I'm gonna start using a buck wagon to come to work? You know, it's, right now, if they wanna do the carriages anywhere throughout the city, not specifically only downtown, plus, I think when you hear some of the reports that I was given about the conditions of stuff, you may have a change of heart, you know?
No, I'm not, I haven't made a decision yet.
Right.
What my point is that banning perhaps is not the solution when regulations might be
Okay, but we don't
improper,
have, we
you know.
don't have, they're unwilling, as far as I was told, they're regulated by the taxi commission. They're suing the taxi commission because they're not metered. And so there is, at this point, no regulations, and they like it that way, I guess. I don't know.
Okay.
I can't speak for them. And if they're in the room, then maybe they'll speak for themselves.
That's definitely.
Alderman Martin.
No questions?
Okay, we'll take questions from the public. This is Bonnie
Yes.
Van.
Boyd, yep.
Boyd?
So you might
Okay.
want to come sit up here.
Yeah.
So I have some
And are you,
information.
tell us, just, go ahead, would you,
She's in favor of banning the horse.
go ahead and tell us where you live and for or against.
I live in the 24th Ward. I am in favor of banning the horses from public streets.
You could just give all of them to the clerk, yeah.
Thank you. So, essentially, my name is Bonnie Boehm. I'm the president of the St. Louis Animal Rights Team. My organization has been receiving calls complaining about the horse-drawn carriages for years. Back in 2010, we got a call from one of the carriage drivers themselves saying that the company they worked for had horses starving to death on their property. At that time, the taxi commission was actually regulating the horse-drawn carriages, so we reported it to them. They sent out an investigating veterinarian who found that all of the horses on the property were suffering from insufficient caloric intake, which means that they were all being underfed. I believe a third of them were actually deemed by the veterinarian too thin to actually work. So there has been a pattern of problems. The taxi commission was aware of that, but for whatever reason, without seeking public comment and without delegating the responsibility to somebody else, the taxi commission stopped regulating the horse-drawn carriages in the fall of 2013. And since then, there has been no meaningful regulation of this industry. There have been 10 injured people. 2 horses died while attached to carriages. There have been at least 4 documented runaway carriages. 2 of them were downtown. The incident that happened on Lenore K. Sullivan, 2 children were actually on that carriage. The father with the infant was able to get off before the carriage actually was moving at a high speed, but the mother with the toddler had to jump off. The toddler hit her head on the ground. You know, my question is, are we really gonna wait until somebody dies before we do something about this? Our organization went to court to try to get the court to basically insist that the taxi commission regulate the industry. That was unsuccessful. There are laws on the books restricting where the carriages can be, but they have not been, they haven't been following them. So I feel like we've exhausted every regulatory avenue. The carriage companies have a history of non-compliance. We did an open records request for correspondence dealing with the horse-drawn carriages. There was a complaint from the Renee Kreisman, who's a police captain downtown, that they circumvented police barricades when the police officer asked the driver not to. The driver became confrontational in public with the police officer. One of the carriage companies, according to Ronald Klein from the Taxi Commission, had been cited to the point of revocation, but they are still out there to this day. So we have regulations on the books, they're not being enforced, and the carriage companies are not gonna comply. So the question then is, does the city assume that responsibility? And does the city come up with the resources to regulate this industry? Or do we just allow them to be out there unregulated, which I think we'll all agree is not an option? And they don't bring in any significant revenue to the city. All of the companies are owned by people none of the companies are owned by people that live in the city. They don't employ city residents on a regular basis. So they really they're a danger to the public, they're a hazard to the horses, and they don't bring in any significant resources to the city. So I am in favor of this ban of equines on public streets.
Okay, thank you.
And just, what I understand, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, that the owners of the carriage company do carry a small insurance policy, whether it's $1 million or whatever it is, but that each driver is an independent contractor, and that they don't. And if somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I was told, and that's what I believe to be true. So if something happens, the city will be liable.
Thank you.
Go ahead and stay right there for me,
Okay.
please. We're gonna take some questions from the committee. Alderman Conway, you have any questions?
Right, I mean, the owner, the drivers are liable, the city's not liable, and the owner has $1 million worth of insurance because they know that they're liable. That's all we have to say.
Okay, Alderman Murphy.
I don't think I have any questions. It seems very extreme. It seems like we should work on trying to enforce the regulations, perhaps make a smaller confined area for them or whatever, before banning them completely downtown. That's just where I feel right now.
Alderwoman Martin.
So I just want to back up. The NTC is being sued, right, to come out from under the taxi commission. I mean,
Right.
what was the plan on who would regulate them if the taxi commission does it?
Well, the taxi commission has stated that the city is actually responsible for the
Okay.
horse-drawn carriage.
Okay, so the NTC does not want, the taxi commission does not want to regulate.
Right.
Okay, but then, like I get notices from the health department, so the health department is sort of regulating with its, or is that just a heap?
So there was a memorandum of understanding between the city health department and the taxi commission that the health department would be responsible for the health and welfare of the horses. But the carriage companies are suing that the taxi commission actually doesn't have the right to regulate them, which would invalidate that memorandum. of
But the
understanding.
taxi commission doesn't want to regulate them either, right?
Right.
So why didn't somebody just take it to the state and just take it out from under the taxi cab commission if everyone agrees?
I mean, I can't answer. We went to court and tried to get the judge to rule on this issue.
It just seems like an easy legislative fix as far as getting them out from under the MTC. If the MTC doesn't want them and their lobbyists are cool with that, and I just don't, it just seems like, I don't really understand why it's in court if everyone agrees that they don't want
I
to
can't
be
really.
regulated. That's fine.
I don't
just
really
am
understand
wondering.
how this has happened the way it has, but I do know that the carriage companies have been, their position is that nobody
No
has the right
regulation.
to regulate them.
Do you know how other cities, like, I know like Charleston, South Carolina is a big horse carriage tour town. Do you know how they're regulated by chance?
Well, they have a lot of issues, and there are a lot of groups in Charleston that are also trying to get them banned from their public streets.
Okay.
A lot of people
there
have
was
been hurt.
a copy of what or who regulates them, or, okay,
Their regulations are not effective either.
okay. All right,
Okay.
thank you.
What is your understanding of exactly who, I'm confused with the regulation piece, so who's responsible for regulating?
I'd like to defer to our attorney, because he has a better understanding of some of these things than I do, so
Okay, well,
can I?
He has to be on that list.
He didn't
Oh.
sign in.
Yeah, sign it.
you just take the last seat at the end of the table, please. Just go tell everybody your name and.
Hi, my name's Dan Coldy. I'm the attorney for the St. Louis Animal Rights Team. And, you know, I could maybe address some of your legal questions.
Okay.
Kind of the way this started, for me at least, is the St. Louis Animal Rights Team hired me after a horse named King died in Tillis Park. And the MTC gave a public statement that they were going to do an investigation. Well, we did a sunshine request, and not only did we find out that there was no investigation, I received a letter from Chuck Billings, the attorney for MTC, who said, you know, the letter said, as I stated on the phone, this is the city of St. Louis's problem.
Okay.
Now, I really, you know, am confused, and I can't answer the next question is, what does the city of St. Louis have to do what happened, you know, with the carriage in St. Louis County? I have no idea. I was never able to get an answer to that question myself. You know, we filed the lawsuit to try to compel MTC to resume their regulations. Now, the problem is there
Okay, I see
is
what
there
you're
is a
saying,
state statute. At one point in time, the city did have regulations in place over the carriages. But then in 2005, 2006, the legislature created the Metropolitan Taxi Cab Commission, and what the statutes say, it's Chapter 67, 1800, that sequence in the Missouri statutes. What it said, it created this taxi cab commission that was going to regulate, you know, any what they said, you know, vehicles for hire, which they included non-motorized carriages in the definition. So, motorized, non-motorized carriage in the business of carrying persons for hire on the streets of St. Louis City or St. Louis County. A statute vested exclusive authority in the MTC, and statute provided that the city's ordinances related to vehicles for hire would sunset within 180 days of the enactment of the Vehicle for Hire Code. So that all happened in 2005, 2006. So pretty much at that point, the way the way that we understood it, and the way we read the statute, and the way that the former city councilor read it as well, is that the city had nothing to do with this and had no idea why MTC was saying that. So we filed the lawsuit. The lawsuit ended when the judge said the case was moot because MTC agreed to start regulating and entered into a memorandum of understanding with the city for additional regulations. So Judge Dowd basically said, well, Dan, you know, I don't see what your issue is any longer because, you know, MTC says they're going to do it. And look, now they've got the city to help them, so you should be happy. So he dismissed the lawsuit. Now, I will point out at one point in time, MTC Director Ronald Klein testified, and I asked him under oath, I said, you know, Director Klein, who is ultimately responsible for the horse carriages in St. Louis City and St. Louis County? And his answer was Mayor Slay. You know, because it was Mayor Slay at the time. Now, what Mayor Slay has to do with St. Louis County again, I never got an answer. So that is kind of the legal background and the statutory background
Okay,
on that.
that helps.
Okay, so why are we here hearing this bill? Because based on what you just told me, we have no authority to,
I think you can ban them. I think you have the authority to ban them.
Jeff, I can tell you, because I did talk to our attorney in the corner there, and yes, we can't regulate horses, but we do have the right to ban stuff from our streets.
okay.
So, by offering this, I really, two things. One, if we don't ban them, I'm hoping that at least this brings them to the table to sit down and talk about serious. Because right now, we have no authority to do anything. We have the authority to either ban them or just let them keep doing what they're doing and then say, you know, let them just run however they want to run.
So will we be in trouble if we ban them but yet make exceptions? Then
Well,
we
because
don't
it's an
select
ordinance,
those.
we have that, even now, I mean, we ban people from drinking except if you're over 21. You know, I mean, there's laws that make exceptions, and the exceptions, we're not gonna ban police horses. We're not gonna ban if there's a parade and there's horses in the parade, we're not gonna ban those horses. We're not gonna ban if they're gonna have the horses in a park, you know, off the streets.
Okay.
But we have the, I'm sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
I was gonna say, you know, obviously the city has its own attorneys and, you know, you guys are going to have your attorneys to look at this, but with the exceptions, I think what the trigger is that the statute only applies for, you know, vehicles for hire, carrying persons for hire. Well, police horses are not carrying persons for hire. Parades sponsored by the city are not carrying persons for hire. It's not a, you know, like, it's not like a taxi, you know, it's, you know, I'll say taxi cab because they are different. It is
No,
a
I get
taxi
it.
cab, but it, you know, so everything in those exceptions, I don't think you're gonna run, the city would run afoul of the statutory language because it's not going after the persons for hire component.
Okay, let me ask this question. We have someone from the health department. Is someone from the health department that's representing the health department on this issue? Or are we just sitting around observing?
We could give some account of what our experience has been with trying to assist the
Okay,
taxi cab
do
commission
me a
in
favor.
enforcement.
So would it be okay for you to represent, I mean, you have a boss, so I don't want to put you on the spot and you're speaking and you're not supposed to be speaking. So is it okay for you to speak before the committee?
It
Okay,
is.
so why don't you switch seats with,
Well, I can tell you what, she can come up here and I'll
Okay.
step aside.
Okay, everybody else, let's clear this area, all right? You're done speaking.
Oh, well, then you can say.
there we go. And then go ahead and state your name and who you with for the record.
I'm Janine Arraghi, and I'm the Bureau Chief for Environmental Health Services, and Animal Care and Control is one of the sections in Environmental Health Service.
Okay.
And I have staff here, my Animal Control Supervisor, Jill Spiker, and the Program Manager of our Animal Control, Shantez Williams.
Okay. So tell us your experiences with this situation.
Well, there's, in addition to the MOU with the Taxi Cab Commission, we have a commissioner's order under the protection of animals, animal welfare regulations of the city. And so
Who's the commissioner? Commissioner's order issued by who?
Commissioner Melba Moore,
Okay.
the acting director of the health
Okay.
department. And we've had that in place for several years. One of the things that we try to do is protect the animals from extreme heat. So there's a regulation that if they're not to be out on the street. That was changed this summer. They're not to be out on the street if the forecast for the day is 93 degrees or higher. So just this past weekend, the forecast on Sunday was to be 93 degrees or higher. And we had animal control officers out on the street contacting the horse carriage drivers to let them know that they were in violation of the commissioner's order. And they were told by the owners of the carriage companies, at least one of them, to just disregard the request to discontinue working. There were at least 2, maybe 3 different companies on the street on Sunday. There are 4 carriage horse companies operating in the city of St. Louis. Another thing that we do is we want to ensure that all of the horses that are working are in good condition. And so we request annually a report from their veterinarian on each of the horses that are operating in the city. So a letter went out to all carriage horse companies in June. All 4 companies got the letter. we received information from one company. So it's a very big challenge for us. We are out on the street in the morning, from 8 AM till 9 AM, and from 4 PM to 5 PM, because they're not, the carriage horse companies are not supposed to be on the street operating during rush hour. And that's really an MTC regulation, but animal control officers are performing that inspection duty, and we document that on a daily basis. We also go visit their stables in the city to ensure that they're in good condition, and in that regard, we have had no complaints.
So what happens when they disobey, you know, an order by your staff? If it's 95 degrees out there, like you're not supposed to be on the street and they just dismiss it, what do you do? What does your staff do?
We refer it to the Metropolitan Taxi Cab Commission.
And if the taxi cab commission does nothing, then they just get to operate how they want to. Okay. Alrighty. Alderman Murphy.
No questions. It does seem bizarre that something would be allowed to operate on the streets without any regulations. And it seems basically that's what's happening right now, that no one wants to take responsibility for, or you guys are to the best of your ability, but the Tax Cash Commission isn't taking responsibility. And that does seem rather bizarre, that they would not be subjected to traffic laws, to, you know, to anything, like everyone else is, you know. I mean, if there was we wouldn't let rickshaw drivers run down the street, I don't think, you know, 3 or 4 abreast, you know. It is odd, that's all. I mean,
Alderman Martin. I'm sorry, Alderman Bosley.
No problem. I guess I just have more of a statement. I think it's kind of super disrespectful for you all being the ones who are supposed to be kind of regulating things, and them to disrespect you all, not even answering requests when you're looking out for the business and the animals. And the city as a whole should kind of look at that, because if we allow businesses to disrespect us, what does that say for people who have more money, seriously, ulterior motives, things like that? I think we probably should do something as far as banning them, giving them a slap on the wrist for a few weeks, see where it hits them economically. I don't know, I just think that is crazy that they just discontinued after you all asked them to do that. That is something, we need to do something about
Well,
that. Whatever.
Just, I mean, you weren't in the room earlier. When the one company, I assume was a company, called me, and I said, well, for the safety of the people, I asked if maybe a second person be put on the horses. And then there are some regulations, because I was on the news when the guys jumped, and their answer to me was, they're doing fine, we just need to regulate all the corrupt aldermen, all the corrupt politicians in the city. And that's when I said, well, thank you for the motivation. Because they are as, and I can't say all the companies, because I don't know all the companies, but they're defiant against any rules. So I offer the amendment to ban them in hopes that either one of two things happen. We ban them, or they come to the table and start talking about serious regulations that we can enforce. So I think they accept either the total ban, or they accept a lot more regulations that, you know, that we can agree to.
I think regardless, they need to be banned for a few weeks or something. I mean, that is, come on, man.
I don't know if we
crazy.
can.
Why are we talking about it? We can't do it
No, no, we can ban them forever. I don't know if we can do a board bill that bans something
temporarily.
temporarily, and that would be, I'd have to ask,
I'm sure we can.
can we?
Yeah, I don't see why we couldn't.
Well, so,
And then they'll come to the table doing that ban if they
So-
really are getting hit. I'm telling you.
if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, can I ask our attorney a question? And we would have to do with, then, can we motion to ban, can I change the motion, but still would have to go in front of the full board, I guess, to ban horses for the next 30 days or whatever it is.
90 days.
90 days, well, and see, you know, what the willingness to, you know, before we adopt something permanently. I don't know how that's done.
Yeah, I would think we can do that, surely we could do that, but before we do something like that, I would wanna make sure that we have conversation with Metropolitan Taxi Commission and, representatives from the, carriage companies. Because just listening to the testimony this morning, it is very disturbing that, they're that disrespectful. I would want to actually hear it from them, that they are not interested in complying with laws and regulations. And if the tax commission is not interested in doing their job, then we may not have a choice. But I would not want to do anything without giving them opportunity to appear before the committee, so that we can get good testimony from them. So I do want to hear from Alderman Ogilvy, and then we're going to wrap this up for today, because we're not going to take a vote on it, because what I'd like you to do is contact the MTC and the carriage companies to see if you can get them to the table for, we can schedule another hearing for next week.
Okay, but, and if they do what they've done,
If they don't show up, then there are options.
then I will ask to have a letter sent, and if you can give me the addresses of the different, I will send a letter in my name. I'll have Teresa do it this afternoon, we'll go out, she'll write the letter asking them to come to a meeting. When's the meeting? Can you give us a date
We
now?
can schedule next Tuesday.
So a meeting
9
next
o'clock.
Tuesday, 9 o'clock, and I'll be specific and give, put in there, we'll give you the opportunity to speak on behalf of your side of whatever. And I will send it to taxi commission as well.
That was gonna be my question, Chairman, is shouldn't we ask for the taxi commission to be
Both,
there?
both,
Okay.
both, yes.
Thank you.
We need to
That's
hear
all.
from both the taxi commission and the carriage companies. Okay, we're gonna hear from Alderman Ogilvy, that's the last testimony.
So if you- before you leave,
Thank you, Chairman. I will reiterate that there is, between the MTC and the health department, there is a pretty minimal set of regulations that these carriage companies are supposed to comply with. And there is a history over a number of years now where they have resisted complying with even those minimal regulations at every turn. Those are regulations like not being on the streets during rush hour, they violate that all the time. Not operating above a certain, in certain weather, they violate that. Disregarding orders from police when police are out there. There are everybody from the health department to City Arch River to the police downtown to the CVC has pretty major issues with the way these carriage companies are operating.
I'm gonna pause one before I forget. Would you invite Katie Ratcliffe from
and we'll
CBC?
do me, yeah, I will, I'll remember.
Okay.
And we're in it's unfortunate that the MTC, this is not really, they're not gonna be experts probably at regulating horse-drawn carriages. The health department is doing the best they can, but MTC had to be forced even to do minimal regulation via a lawsuit. And even then, with that lawsuit, the carriage companies continue to not want to comply. There are not all that many horses on the street, and this is there are serious incidents that are being documented that are a threat to people's public safety downtown. And so I think given the, I would say defiance of the operators to follow some pretty minimal safety regulations and all the injuries they have already caused to customers and to people on the street, that it is not unreasonable to ban them from streets. I don't think we're losing a lot by doing that, and I think we take a load off of the health department, off of animal control, off of police downtown, and it's a reasonable course of action given the history of the last 5 years. So, thank you.
Okay, let me do it this way. Any committee members have questions for Alderman Ogilvy? Okay, we'll consider.
Anybody want to co-sponsor? be added.
We'll consider Board Bill 129 heard today. We're gonna rehear this bill next Tuesday. Next Board Bill, we're gonna go back to Board Bill 113. Sponsored by Alderman Arnowitz.
Just take one passage.
I'd like to introduce amendment number 1 to Board Bill 113.
Second.
Move second. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Conway,
Aye.
Alderman Moore, Alderwoman Murphy,
Aye.
Alderman Kotar, Alderwoman Boyd, Alderman Bosley,
Aye.
Alderwoman Martin,
Aye.
Chairman Boyd.
Aye.
5 aye votes.
Okay, amendment number 1 basically puts all the pretty whereases and the justification for Board Bill 113. I'd like to make a motion that we pass Board Bill 113 as amended out of committee with a due pass recommendation.
So moved.
Previous roll.
No objection to previous roll. Board Bill 113 as amended comes out of committee with due pass recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
No problem. I think that, there's 2, but we don't have. Okay, well, hello there,
Well,
Alderman
hi
Boyd.
there, ma'am.
Construction, that's all I can
Okay, we're gonna hold Board Bill 121 and 127.
Okay.
And we will consider the Street Refuge and Lighting Committee adjourned.
Okay.